Well, hello everyone. Hi, welcome. Goodness. This is a wonderful, wonderful turnout. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Marissa Lynn Jones. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Executive Director here at the League of Chicago Theaters, and welcome to our inaugural career fair. We're so excited to have all of you here with us today. We're excited for all of our member organizations and partners that are here with us, and we're really excited for this panel of people that are up here with me today as we talk about careers in the theater industry, as we talk about what's available, especially outside of being on stage, all of the roles in administrative and production work, and just career path and how career path changes and develops over time, lessons we've learned along the way. I'm so glad to be up here with our panel this morning. I'm going to do some introductions. We have Willa Taylor, the Walter Director of Education and Community Engagement at Goodman Theater. Bob Mason, Artistic Associate and Casting Director at Chicago Shakespeare Theater. Jasmine Jones Oliver, People and Culture Director at Looking Glass Theater. Jen Gata, Director of Production at Court Theater. And Sarah Carranza, Director of Communications, Chicago Latino Theater Alliance.
Could everyone move towards the center of their section and cut out any open seats? I think we're going to make it, but we just want to make some room for folks just coming in.
And this right here is our Director of Programming, Jamie Avison,
Sorry to interrupt, but we are so excited you're all here today. We want to try to make room for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Great. So just to talk a little bit about where we are today in this career fair, we wanted to really talk about the opportunities in the theater industry and what is available, the different career paths people have been on. So just to get us started with the first question, how many of you started in theater or went to school for theater? Okay, got a little bit of the panel there. When you went to school, what did you go to school for, and what did you think your path would be?
I was a journalism major in college and had done theater since I was a kid. But I expected to be a foreign war correspondent. I got on this path because a really good friend of mine was directing a show that was supposed to open in 2 days, and she lost her stage manager and needed somebody to come and help her, and that's how I got started.
Throw me in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was a little like being on the war path.
It was sort of like being a war path. Yeah, it was.
I went to Northwestern for acting.
Can't hear you.
I went to Northwestern for acting. I come from a really small town. I had done 4 high school musicals and a senior play, and that was the extent of my theater experience. But luckily at Northwestern you didn't have to audition to get in. You got in based on your grades. So I got good grades, and I went to go visit the campus after I got accepted, and I happened to sit in on an acting class taught by David Downs, and it was like, this is what I've been looking for. And it wasn't about being an actor, being in TV and movies. It was about, they're working on Hedda Gabler, and it was about the psychological, why do people do what they do? And why does that astonish us? And I was like, this is what I want to study. So it really didn't have anything to do with Meisner or any of that, the liberal education. So I was an actor in Chicago for about 15 years. Doing mostly musicals and Christmas Carol at Goodman.
I think everybody except me has been in Christmas Carol.
Chicago's law and order.
I'll go. So I was an English major. So I went to Performing Arts High School. I'm from Miami, Florida, so I am not from here. So I went to Performing Arts High School. I did the musicals. I did the whole thing. Then I went to college and majored in English because I listened to my parents, who said you need a good job and you need to pay your bills. And so I went that route, but that took 10 years away from me because that's what I was doing. And then I started working with young people in the arts, and then I got the bug again, and that kind of like set me afloat in my career as far as like curriculum building and working with teaching artists and being more on the admin side. So I'm still doing a lot of English because there's a lot of writing involved in my job, but that's kind of how I got started.
So I went to school for computer science, and about halfway through, and was doing theater on the side as a way to get to know people and find my way through a new community, and very sort of gradually realized I was spending more and more time in the theater department and less time on my computer science work. So ultimately I got a degree in directing and a minor in computer science. And very quickly after I got out of school, realized that directing was not the path for me, that I had sort of been led to believe by some not good career advice that that was where I should be. But I don't have a director's toolkit, I never have, and I don't wish to. But that my skill sets were in production, so I started stage managing and eventually found my way into production. And was able to do, once I was able to let go of the, like, I was told that I should want to be a director, realized that, like, that great feeling when you realize you're in the field that you belong in, or your skill sets align. That's kind of what happened.
Thank you. Sarah Carranza here, born and raised Chicagoan proper, but went to school my entire life in the suburbs. I am first generation Mexican American, so I went to college telling my parents I was going into pre-law. It wasn't until it was too late that they realized I was actually going in for theater. So I call myself a recovering actor because I realized, much like you did, that acting was not my pathway. When a stage manager who was working at 16th Street Theater looked at my book in a show I was in with him and saw how organized my beats were with tabs and color-coded emotion changes, and he thought I should become a stage manager. So then that created an entire pathway of stage managing that ended up leading into directing, that led up to producing, and then also at the same time, I don't know if you can tell, I minored in communications, so I ended up moving my pathway to producing and communicating with folks. And that's where I am here today.
All these different paths leading you off to the theater, and you know, I think a lot of people don't think about all the background work that goes into, you know, getting a production on stage so that it's presented in a way where we see it. It'd be great to hear a little bit about your different departments and the work that you do and why you're doing it in theater as opposed to corporate makeup.
I think I have the most important job.
Okay.
I make sure people get paid.
Yes.
So in my work, with my title as People and Culture Director, I like to think I help put more humanity in human resources. So I'm thinking about livable wages. I'm thinking about policies and procedures that's going to help you have a work-life balance. I'm thinking about time off, right? What does that look like? Should we change the policy? I'm thinking about my peers and how they're paying their staff and how can I retain my staff. So I think my job is most important because people want to get paid and paid on time. Did I answer the question?
And I'd say my job is just as important. Because I want people to feel appreciated. And having been an actor for 15 years makes a huge difference on how I approach my job, because I know what it took for you to get those 2 minutes in front of me. You know, so I'm not going to disrespect you, and I'm going to be present in the room. You know, and it's really one of my leading tenets in doing what I do, is again to bring humanity into the humanities. Because it's so easy in this business, especially because it's so freaking stressful. We make it so stressful. work-life balance. It's like all these discussions in the pandemic about we're going to change it all, and I'm like, has that happened yet? They still have 4 weeks of vacation coming.
Yes.
That's a big part of it for me artistically, and also to the last few years, the conversations we've been having with IEA has completely changed the way I do my job. Completely opened my eyes to so many blind spots that were hard to see but really important to see, and just completely changed even just the procedures that I have in place.
For me, I do theater because it means that we're getting in contact in person with someone else. I actually really started theater when I was 3 years old, when I was the apple in a very hungry caterpillar. And my career since then has always been in white theater spaces. And with that came a lot of significant trauma of not being enough or talking too much with my hands. I'm actually controlling that right now from things that I learned in school that I wish I never did learn. And so when I work with the Chicago Latino Theater Alliance, our job is to really give a voice to the people who have been told they didn't have a space. And especially with the idea that there's a conversation out in the world that American theater looks a certain way, but as a Latina, we have been in existence in the United States since its inception, and yet our theater stories have never really been given the space it needed to have highlights, to have resources. So what I really find passion in is creating that safe space for people like me who are basically told to get their Mexican germs off of other people's things, or that my dad should be mowing their lawn. So why don't you come into our theater spaces, be made familia, and realize that we have more in common with one another than we do have differences. So I only think that that kind of connection can really be happening, not through a screen, but through experiences you have in the same room while you share a heartbeat with someone else.
I just love to acknowledge, I was excited to be on this panel because of how incredibly different our work is, each of us here. But what I love is that every answer has been about communication. And ultimately what the theater is about is like 2 people talking on stage, and about the actors communicating with the audience, and about the audience having a communal experience with each other. It's always about communication, and that's what I'm excited about when I think about theater. So I just love the fact that everyone here is approaching their jobs from a different perspective on caring for people and how people interact with each other, even though our day-to-day work is really different. I will say that one of the best things about my job is that I get to manage a whole team of people who have different skill sets from me. So I manage the scene shop and a costume shop, and the lighting team, and sound, and video, and the designers, and so I get to work with people who I don't have any of the skills that they have, and that the only way we get to make theater is by collaborating, getting to lead that collaborative process where we bring together these unique skill sets of artisans and actors and writers and designers to make something, and like that is the great joy of my position, is getting to just draw together those amazing skill sets into a single thing.
I feel like my job is to get theater out of the theater building. As the Director of Education and Engagement, I see my responsibility as making space for the kind of stories that you were talking about, the stories that don't get told, the stories that don't get heard, often told by and for people who are often not invited into our kind of spaces, and making sure that communities understand the value both of their stories by elevating them onto our stages, but also making sure that, that all of the people that we work with understand that theater is more than actors on a stage and presentation on a stage. That theater is a set of skills and tools and communication devices that allow for our humanity through our stories to be told in venues everywhere. And the more that we can see the commonality in those stories, the better chance that we have.
Great, thank you. Going off of this conversation too, just a little bit, because there's so many dynamics in theater, and as we've seen after the murder of George Floyd. There's a lot of change that was produced over
Performed. I would say there was a lot of change performed.
over the last couple of years in terms of not only corporate spaces but also theaters. So I heard a couple of things about safe space, about making space for others and other people's stories. How do you bring that idea work, that EDIA work, into the work that you do every day? And how do you see that impacting the greater theater community?
Well, I got to do that work with you, a lot of that work with you, when you were at Goodman. My department has always been sort of the outlier in the building. We have always been more about social justice and about sort of the tenets of social justice than really anything else. We see our responsibility in the Education and Engagement Department as understanding the world through the stories that we tell and the stories that we make. I think that there has been a lot of performance of diversity and inclusion. I look around this room and I think about what that means. I'm not sure ever that any institution or system where there is power and where there are dynamics of power will ever give up power willingly. And so it's easy to make a statement, to put a few more people of color on stage, to create an initiative, to bring in playwrights of diversity, to think about accessibility, except when power has to be shared or changed. And that is where I think we hit a glass ceiling in the industry.
The question for me is really kind of hard to answer in terms of since George Floyd, because doing Latino work or Latina work is in and of itself it is a celebration of diversity. So Latinidad is not a monolith. There's over 26 different Latino countries that people can hail from. And of those countries, the race of those individuals span the entirety of the spectrum. As you can tell, I'm more of a white-leaning looking Mexican-American. My father was more of an indigenous-leaning Mexican, and my grandmother on my mother's side was more black-leaning. So in the celebration of our stories, it is that the specificity of who we are as told by ourselves is what creates that universality. I don't necessarily think that having a catastrophic situation should have led that door to open for other people to say, you deserve to have a space. We, in our organization, operate as that period, and we have since our inception in 2016. I do want to acknowledge that with that, we also have different theater companies. So we work alongside the boots on the ground theater companies here in Chicago that try to tell their own stories as it should be told. So that includes urban theater, which has a Puerto Rican leaning background. Teatro Tariacuri, we have one of the artistic director's children here in the front, and they are Mexican. We've got Subtext Theater now, who are fresh out the gate. By helping them find resources, we are allowing them to tell the stories that they need to tell, and we as an organization aren't the one trying to manipulate or fit them into any mold, because you can't fit diversity into a mold, and it can't just be an action statement.
We were talking earlier, before we started, just about one of the huge shifts in Chicago right now is the generational one, where all but two major theaters have, like, our district director left 2 weeks ago, our executive director left in December. We're waiting to find out who the new team is going to be. But that's all across Chicago. I mean, there's just so much change, and the great thing about it is that, even with how devastating the pandemic has been for so many, all theaters across the country, it does give you a chance to evaluate and actually bring people in that could make a change. I've found in the last few years, as the younger generation came up and started doing a short Shakespeare or something like that, how much easier it was to make a cast of all different kinds of people without thinking about it. You know, it just generationally, it was like Shakespeare's the white guy, and there's part of us that just always bought in, we don't have actors of color that can do this. You know, and now, I'm flooded with actors of color in Shakespeare, and also the question of what does it mean to speak a 400-year-old language and make it authentic to yourself? And that's something that we're really talking about too. That it doesn't have to be a certain way, it doesn't have to be a mid-Atlantic accent. You know, so there's just so many plates spinning right now, but in a great way. And I know the proof's going to be in the pudding, so we just keep on working to make it a tasty pudding.
I can speak on when it comes from an HR perspective. So right before George Floyd, there was this slow desire to have a people and culture something. And then when George Floyd happened, there was this huge spike. And now theater is trying to create this role that was just for the staff and just for the people. I don't think we have completely identified what this role is. I'm figuring it out, right? In the moment, live, as I'm speaking to you, I'm still trying to figure out what my actual job is, and I'm making it up as I go. And I can say that for other peers who are in that same position. So there is this desire to want to be for the people, to understand the power dynamic and give people more voice in their jobs. I can say specifically for me, I'm looking at not just when you're hired, but how I develop those interview questions, right? What barriers are being created in the interview? Do you actually need a degree to have this job when you have the experience? No, right? What skill sets do you need to have, or can you be trained on the job? I want the person that I'm interviewing to interview me as well. How do you see yourself? Are your core values in alignment with this organization? Because if it's not, don't apply. Don't force yourself to be in alignment with an organization that does not meet your standards. Same thing for us, and we're trying to figure that all out in the middle. Like, who are we? Who do we want to be a part of this ecosystem? And how do we seek to change it, right? And I think the other thing is, when it comes down to anti-racism work, like, that's forever. That's never going to stop. And we reach a glass ceiling, and then people become resistant, and there is tension. Okay, so how do we have the conversation? How do we disagree? Because I can still work with you and not agree with you, but how do we work through those conflicts that it's not like, oh, well, if it's not my way, then it's just whatever. So it's been very tricky understanding that since George Floyd, because even before then, there was a desire to make work life or just the environment better for the staff, but it's really hard in the theater world to be people-focused when it's so art-focused, when it's all poured into, we gotta do this show, we gotta make this happen, and you're not thinking about the bodies that are putting in all that work to make it happen. We're slowly shifting to this world where the work life is surrounding your personal life, whereas before it's everything for the job. We're doing 18-hour days, and now we're slowly moving to this space where do you feel in your body is the best time of day for you to get this work done? Because that's where where are you the most effective? If it's 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., cool. If it's 12 a.m. to 8 a.m., cool. But we just need to figure out how best you can do this work. And so it's hard. Like, it's really, really hard, even when it comes to education. Where are we going and reaching out to these people or these students to get education and get into these venues that are not theater? I bought my mentee today. We partnered with Urban Alliance, which is an organization that, a mentorship organization that aligns Black and brown students, seniors, to different companies in Chicago. I want her to see everything, right? I want to expose her to everything, because had it not been for UA, she probably would not be in this space right now. She doesn't even know what she could possibly do because she's not in those spaces. And that's part of my mission overall, is to expose more Black and brown students to theater. Because there's a moment where when you're a Black person, you're only shown to be on stage talent, and all of a sudden it stops. You have no idea that you can be a production assistant, or that you can be a stage manager, or that you can be the director, or that you can be the costume person. Like somehow in our learning, that just stops. And so my whole thing is trying to introduce other ways. She's about to be in DePaul for hair and wig. She didn't even know she could do that, right? So like she used her skill set. She brought to the looking glass, and we were able to like find out where she fit. And had she not been partnered with us, or had I not been in a position at Looking Glass to partner and be with her, she probably would not have seen that. And I think that's part of the work too.
Something that I think has been really important to me in my career, and a mentor said this to me very early in my career, which was people are our greatest asset. The things that a theater company owns are so small compared to the value of the assets. Again, because this is the industry, I mean, the whole art form at the end of the day is about people interacting with other people. And so the people who make your art, whether it's on stage, off stage, in the box office, all those things, those are so much more important an asset than anything else you could possibly have than your building, your costumes. So that has guided some of my choices, hopefully always, in terms of like, where, if I have limited resources, we all have limited resources when we're doing, where do you put those resources? Do you put them into people? Do you put them into stuff? Do you know, and where, like, the resources you put into people will pay over time so much more effectively than any amount of investment you can make in even in infrastructure. So these that's been incredibly important, and that kind of value is really important to make like little tiny decisions even, where I'm like, I have $5,000, how do I split this up? If I have to cut a budget, do I eliminate the wage increase I was hoping to make, or do I eliminate some stuff? Do I cut my materials budget by 10%? And those kinds of small value judgments happen every single day, and those are really important to think about. Something else that Court's been thinking about a lot in the last few years has been, we are a classic theater company, is our definition, and who owns the classics? Who gets to decide what is a classic? Who gets to be in a classic? Who's our intended audience to receive what is a classic play? Who gets to decide when something enters or leaves the classic canon? And when I first started working at Court, I remember asking, do we have a rigorous definition of what classic is? And thinking, this seems a little loosey-goosey that we don't have one, and I've come to see what value that is in our work, because we get to continuously redefine who we are and what that means. Yeah.
Thank you. I've heard a lot as we went down the panel about somebody told me I should be a stage manager. Somebody told me I should be this because I do this. Do you think there are certain characteristics that feed into the type of person that should be in your role, A, or are there stronger characteristics when people are considering roles in your, considering placement in roles such as yours, or what strengths or certifications or books should people be reading if they're considering a role in the role that you have?
Low-key should be a psychology major. Because I am the in-house therapist. That's my role. I appreciate that people have a space or a person that they can go to, not just to complain, but to offer recommendation, to say this is not working, this process is not working, this system is not working, or to say, I don't like my manager, we don't communicate well, and I mediate the conversation, or I help training with like conflict resolution, things like that. But a big bulk of my job is literally sitting and talking to people. And if you're not willing to talk to people and listen and be able to regurgitate what you heard, then this is not the role. I also do a great deal of writing, right? Writing policies, rethinking policies. I'm constantly in training, like legal stuff. What can we do legally? We're still a 501c3 nonprofit organization. There's things that we would love to do, but can we legally do this? So I also need a law degree. There's also a great deal of rest, and the desire and the need to have rest, like you have to actually put that in your schedule because you'll be so overwhelmed with all the emotions of all the people that are talking to you. So you also have to have a great deal of like boundary setting, right? I have to set boundaries, like I have a focus time, no one interrupts my focus time, because if I'm interrupting my focus time to talk to you, then there's no time for myself. So you have to be able to set very, very clear boundaries and know that about yourself. You also may have to work outside of your work hours. My job also deals with like workers' comp. So somebody gets into an accident on a Saturday night at an every performance, I'm on, right? So I may be having dinner and get a phone call like, somebody fell off the stage and I have to go through something. But understanding that the job is flexible in a lot of ways, but also it requires a lot of emotional intelligence. And you just kind of got to be willing to, and then also you have to understand and be willing and open to different people, how to communicate, have cultures. I have to do a lot of research. I'm not expecting someone from another community to explain to me how that community communicates. That's my job. So I have to do a lot of research on how people communicate, or I'll ask that person like, hey, how would you like this conversation to go? I want you to lead how we're going to have this conversation. So, yeah, you need a law degree, you need psychology, you need work-life balance, you have to be able to set boundaries. Sometimes you need to know math. Just to make sure that people get paid and how they're supposed to be paid. And, yeah, that's about it.
For me, something that's really valuable about me that I didn't know I was going to be a casting director is kind of like someone, I quit acting like in the late 90s, and 2 years later someone said, hey, would you want to interview for this job? And I'm like, no, I don't have any experience. And then 15 minutes later I called them and said, this is a great job for me. And it's because when I was an actor, when I wasn't working, I saw everything. I mean, everything. Some of my best memories of just coming here today, there was a little theater, I think it was Big Game. Like a 50-seat black box, sweaty in August. And I saw this production of Women in Water, John Guar play. And it was 3 hours long in this sweaty black box. Blew me away. I was only maybe 20 years old. I found a program for it recently and realized David Cromer had directed it with Natasha Lowe starring in it. So I had, once I got to this job, I had so much learning to do about Shakespeare, but also right out of college, I ended up taking a class that I saw advertised in a black box on North Halsted, and ended up being Barbara Gaines teaching the photo technique, which is then, so I saw Henry V on the rooftop of the Red Lion Pub, which was the first show they ever did. So in a lot of ways, my roots trace back to then, even though I wasn't expecting to have a job like this. But my interests were, I love theater, I love watching plays. I don't like, it's still a weird thing for a casting director to say, because you have to be hypercritical, but I don't like to be hypercritical. It's finding that leeway of, maybe that's not the way I would have done it, but what did they just bring to it that I didn't expect? So that's something I think, just as a casting director, I knew a casting director once when I first started who'd been at it long enough that they were like, when someone said like, what do you do for like, someone goes up on their monologue, and they say, can I start again? She goes, I say no. And I was like, that is not acceptable. Everybody has a bad day. Or just saying, getting frustrated with actors. And whenever I would get that way, I have to step back and go, take a breath. Because you're making it about you now and not them. But I would say just that, it really is that love of theater and all kinds of theater. Because the great thing about Chicago, the best place to be a casting director is because you can go for an Edward Albee play, into a kabuki, into a little night music, into a Edward Albee play at court. I mean, Robert Robertson did all those things, like in a year. And that's what's great about Chicago too, is that cross-pollination that you get to do and meet someone and go, you're not right for the Wizard of Oz, but you could be in Pericles, So.
Something I think, speaking as a production manager, my very first production management job, Jason Lowe at the artistic director really mentored me into that position. On the first day, like a set of set designs came in, and I was like, I don't know how to price these out. I've never been a carpenter, and he said, you don't have to know how to do everything, you just have to know how to ask the right questions. And that was incredibly valuable advice I've taken with me always, because there's so many different versions of that, of how to ask questions. And that's a reminder to me to get out of my own way when I'm feeling insecure about not knowing something. Because again, the magic of my job is that I manage a whole group of people who have different skill sets than me. So my job is just to ask questions and encourage other people to feel safe to ask questions, because through that we can continue to make the art better and better that way. So again, it always comes back to people. Like, how do I create an environment where people feel comfortable asking questions and saying, I don't know, and saying, I'm always trying to create an environment where people can get out of the hot spot. Like, no one likes to be put on the spot, right? So I'll say, here's a question, please go away and think about this. You don't have to answer right now, because none of us do very well when put on the spot with questions like that. So, which is, I guess, ultimately comes back to a lot of what I do is not about technical theater, it's about people. It's about creating an environment where the people with their specific skills can come in and do what they do beautifully.
I think for me, everyone here has an interest in theater, so I'm not going to recommend anything in theater. I'm going to say live your life, because you are going to learn so much from the world that you can transfer over, period. I learned so much from being a medical insurance biller right out the gate of college, so I could afford to be that stage manager. I've learned so much from watching Love Island. It's like everyone said, it's a people job, and the people from Love Island are also ticket buyers. So how do you communicate with someone who watches that show versus someone who goes in for that Shakespeare piece that's so in-depth, or that Brecht that is so nuanced? Well, you still need to talk to the person who watches The Bachelor. Like, those scenarios as well also teach you what you can bring into the theater as well, how you communicate with someone else. And so for the most part, my mentors don't have anything to do with theater. They have been in the corporate world, teaching me the structures that we have to go against, and then you see, oh, some theaters kind of operate in the same kind of structure. That's not what I want to do. I'll find somewhere else that fits me, like you mentioned earlier. So live your life. Even going to the beach can actually be something that you bring back into a space because you've healed yourself.
Yeah, I tell actors that all the time. Don't let go of those things you love to do, like playing the guitar or doing your crossword puzzles or whatever, because it's going to feed something in you that it's just going to be valuable, who you are and what you bring on stage.
Yeah, I think you have to stay curious, right? In any of the fields that we're talking about. But I also think, certainly in terms of education and engagement, I think you need to understand the world and the way that systems work to both include and disinvite folk, and then understand how to take what is on the stage and on the page and translate that into something that is contemporary for people, especially students, to care about and to relate to. Part of the difficulty with our educational system generally in this country is that as a teacher, I can tell you what you need to know, when in reality, what I should be doing is facilitating your process of knowing and learning what you want to know and learn. And so that is part of the beauty, I think, of sort of the education director position, is because you are not hidebound to the rigors and the roles of a traditional educator. Your job is really to translate and facilitate the opportunity for students, and students can be from 4 to 104. You are facilitating their ability to understand where they enter the work that you're doing and how that relates to them specifically.
We have a great program at Chicago Shakespeare. It's called the Shakespeare Slam, and it's high school students who they'll do a scene from whatever play we picked, like it was Richard III this year. And then the second half, they get to take any piece of entertainment or literature and they blend it with Richard III the way they feel it should be blended. So, and they have to use all the language of Richard III, but it can be taken out of context. But they had, like, We had a Real Housewives episode, Richard III in a mashup of She Loves Me. Very odd, but it's so imaginative and it tells you what is on their mind. You know, and sometimes it just breaks your heart.
Yeah.
But for them to pick a piece of literature and go, this is what Shakespeare is to me. A little more of that.
Great. I think we'll take a couple of questions before we close out. And all of our panelists are sticking around for the next hour or so to talk to people, so we'll have time with them as well. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Hi, Fredo Aguilar, he, they pronouns, freelance production manager, stage manager. Given what is going on right now with the writer's strike and with the strikes going on, what can y'all talk to about here in Chicago, specifically when it comes to living wages and the opportunities available to us for staying with theaters in terms of the benefits that come along with that, okay? For years, it has been a struggle to even, when I started here, starting at $15 an hour. Now companies want to try to get us at $18 an hour, instead of going to 20, where it should even begin the conversation. Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you. So, for those who don't know, Looking Glass recently had to lay off almost more than half of our staff, right? Much like other nonprofit theaters across the country, we have been making these announcements this year, some of last year. Here's what we're combating in this moment. Since the pandemic, production costs have gone up, like materials have increased, right? Trying to also match livable wages, because we can't go back to $15, $13 an hour. We gotta meet people at a higher rate. So trying to do those two things, all while audience are not filling 50% of the house anymore, that's putting us in a very, very precarious spot. So we have to make decisions. Do we want to pay people the way to have less of a staff, or do we want to have more of a staff at less of a wage so that we can still do the art that we want to do? That's where we are right now, making that decision. So for Looking Glass in particular, it was, we need to reduce our staff so that the remaining staff can have the wage that they're supposed to have, so that we can do the work that needs to be done, because I don't want to insult people with a $35,000 salary when they're doing education, community engagement, and marketing. That's crazy, right? But that's where a lot of us are right now, is making those decisions where we have to choose whether or not we want to value the people that we have, and that may mean we're going to have to lay off somebody, or we're going to have to reduce programming, which is what we had to do. Our producing model is going to have to change in order so that we can make sure people get paid. We may not be able to do 3 shows a year. We might have to reduce that to 1 or 2, or maybe we have to rethink how we choose seasons and where we do that season, and how and what do we need as far as the production is concerned. Do we need a full fly and all those things, or can we do the same show in a different way? These are all different questions that we have to ask in order for you to get paid what you deserve. So that's kind of where we are right now. As far as the strike, that is a question that's coming up, and it's going to impact theater in a way too, because I foresee people coming to audition more for theater because of the strike. So how do we deal with that when we're going to have this influx of people and we're not producing as much? It's like, whoa, how do we handle this shift, layers of shifts and transitions that are happening? We want to be able to support the people that are impacted by the strike. We also want to be able to support the people who are still here in Chicago who want to do theater. To be honest, going back to what Sarah said, you might need to go live your life, because at this moment, I'm not sure if you can pay your bills solely being an actor, solely being a stage manager. You know, like you have to think about, you have to think about something else. You might have to be a teaching artist for some time. That's unfortunate news, but that's just the reality of where we are right now. Just from what I'm seeing in the pays and all the other things, the goal is to pay people what they deserve, but also understanding that we can't go into the red every single time we try to do that, so we have to make other decisions.
And Shakespeare didn't write small plays.
Yeah.
So you decide to do, like gone are the days of, 20 people cast, but do you do a 14-person Richard III, or do you do a 6-person Cymbeline? You know, and get invented that way, but there are different takes to what you're getting from the experience. You know, and being a Shakespeare theater, we have to have some Shakespeare on that stage. And we, you know, keep on moving forward with what people make, not going backwards.
Yeah.
So it's something that really in planning now, we're just so meticulous with every step that we take.
I think that's a great question too, and that combines all of these roles together, right? Because as we look at the theater season, that combines all of these people sitting here in helping to make those decisions and talking about how you pay teaching artists, how you pay stage managers, how you pay actors, how you pay everybody involved in putting that story on stage, livable wages, and how do you attack that from the different departments, from the different roles, how you get in these positions even to help make those decisions. Because we have these roles, then we also have CFOs, we also have the producers of the shows, we also have the artistic directors, so those roles as well, and how do we break those barriers and those roles in order to make those decisions and be a part of that decision-making process. Anybody else want to?
For me, it's very hard to discuss that in terms of the fact that of all the organizations up here right now, we are the youngest, but we're also, we're not in the $1 million budget range. As a Latina theater company, we have never been afforded that kind of money. Out of the nation, Latina theaters, there's only 5 that operate over $1 million. I can tell you that's New York, California, Florida, and Texas. There's only one equity theater company in the Midwest that is Latina, and that's Teatro Vista. But I can also tell you that what we do at our organization, we do make sure we try to make at least the minimum wage for our employees, but we hire. So we run the Destino Chicago International Latino Theater Festival every fall. We bring in Latina companies from Latin America, the US, but we highlight the companies that do that work here. And in the span of anywhere between 4 and this year 7 weeks, we present anywhere between 10 to 17 full productions. Of that, we basically use that as a marketing tool as well to try to fundraise for the companies that are here. And so we give them a stipend, we don't ask for any of their ticket sales in return, but we try to infuse dollars into those organizations so they can start paying fairly. I mentioned earlier, I never, prior to my current job in theater, had a full-time job in theater. I worked a full-time job as a medical billing associate for hospitals and other things, and then worked on the side. I am the storefront girl I am proud to be storefront, but I will tell you it got me hospitalized because I was working multiple full-time jobs. And so I needed health care. I had my day job, but I made $250 for 4 months of work, and that didn't even include the run.
Yep.
No extras for the run. That did include the run. So as we try to advocate from our perspective, we cannot continue that model, and what that means for the Chicago storefront scene is yet to be seen. But I do see that the league, and I got a really beautiful email asking about if the member theaters would be interested in providing health care.
Yeah.
I could never have dreamed about that 10, 15 years ago. I had to have that job. So as we start making those changes, unfortunately, we're never going to get there in like a short time frame. But as long as we're making steps and the people who are producing the work are actively choosing to pay fairly, we're going to be probably in the same boat as SAG-AFTRA and the WGA.
I think that the theater industry generally is at an inflection point, whether we want to admit it or not. The model that we have worked on, the not-for-profit model, is broken. Let's just be honest about that. It's broken and it's not sustainable. And so what is the way we move forward? What is the model for doing theater? And I don't think we've come up with it yet. We talked a lot about it when we were on quarantine, just like we talked about DEI work, like we talked about inclusion, like we talked about putting people first. And as soon as we came back into being in person with each other, with audiences, we went right back to the old model of working, and it's not sustainable. For one thing, anytime that foundations and corporations are your primary ways of getting money, there is going to be a real disconnect between who you need to serve and who you are served. Secondly, I think going back down the line, the conservatory model is not, frankly, working. You need life experience to be on stage. There's a reason why an actor as brilliant as somebody like Ryan Dennehy would say, I couldn't do Lear until I got to be X age. Because of life, not because of the number of classes that you took in school. And it keeps you, certainly where I teach, it keeps you from sort of exploring other ways and other options because you're so busy chasing that coursework that you have to do. You never get to understand, you never get to think about what else and how else you could be doing what you're doing. I would say that part of what we need to consider, I don't think that audiences are ever going to come back in the way that they are there. I'm going to stay home and watch somebody somewhere and binge that, as opposed to paying $75, $80 to have to put on clothes and go someplace. That's the reality. So what does that mean in terms of how we use recorded content? What does it mean in terms of how we use our archives? What does it mean in terms of engaging with people in other ways other than within the building, face to face? Are there ways that we can partner and do collaborations with other theaters? Because the reality is perhaps the ecosystem cannot sustain the number of theaters that we have right now. So how do we rethink the whole model and build a new way? And that's going to be up to y'all. That's what you should be thinking about, because it's up to you to figure out how the ship really rights itself.
I don't know if I fully agree with you. I think that we yearn to be in community with one another. You see that by the sold out Taylor Swift concerts, Sheeran concerts. You see that you
Sure.
How much of it is that we have adopted a model of theater where we're talking at people instead of having a conversation with people?
And that's the big problem, right? Because we don't even, if you go to a Taylor Swift concert.
I'm singing along. I didn't go, I wish I did.
Well, but you can listen to Taylor Swift at home and in your car and in an ecosystem that supports sort of that art, right? We don't do that in any kind of way. A person, usually, decides what everybody should see in a season without any consultation from community in any kind of way. That is the basic model, and a lot of those decisions are made because of what money they will bring in, not because of what good they will do within community or how they will even speak to community, with the exception of February, which is Black History Month, where all Black people work.
Well, we do ours in like Latina History Month, right? But here's a situation too, and we've brought it up, a pandemic happened, and in that pandemic, the majority of audiences that passed away were older generations who watched older generation theater. So the people who are left behind are traumatized, are generationally younger. In Chicago, our demographic, it ranges around like, at least the Latina, we make 1 out of 3 people in the Chicagoland area. Of that, the median age range is 33 or younger. What we're looking for is experience. We want to go into a space that makes us feel, that makes us in community, that makes us a part of it, and yet we're still seeing the same things as I believe you might have mentioned. We're seeing the same things that we saw before the pandemic happened, geared towards an audience that's frankly scared to go out of their homes. But you're still seeing packed buses, you're still seeing packed concerts, you're still seeing packed sporting events, and yet theater is not catching up to that because we refuse to adapt our way of storytelling.
I also think that
So we have this next generation coming forward of industry leaders who are going to be a part of that conversation and a part of changing what that looks like for the future. So on one side, it's a little scary. On the other side, it's exciting. So we have to continue and strive to look at the missions of the organizations as you go around, as you look at the tables today, look at those missions. I always say if you can't connect with the mission statement of an organization, you will not be happy. Not just the statement on paper, but the statement in action. So make sure you're doing that research and that they're backing up the words that they have on the page. We can do this all day. We're going to have everybody down here. We're going to break people up in groups so people can circle around. Because this is our inaugural career fair. This is our thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you also for sticking around after this. If you're not familiar with the League is a service organization. We serve all of the theaters, we serve all of our member theaters, so about 200 theaters across the city of Chicago, from all different spaces, all different sizes, all different budget groups. So if you look on this list, this is just a subset of the number of members that we have. You can go to leagueofchicagotheaters.org to see our full membership list. This is something we're starting back up. We have industry nights, we have trainings, we have panel discussions throughout the year, so please continue to check up on us as we continue our programming. I do just want to make an announcement that DePaul and Northwestern Theater Management professors Diane Clausen and Barbara Lutz and I are collaborating to bring together students from both universities in a shared classroom where we'll research, assess, and ideate innovative solutions for the theater industry. So what we were talking about today about what it looks like for that next generation of theater. So they're combining classrooms. And there will be a course called Arts Leadership and Innovation coming. So please look for that on DePaul's website. We'll have more information on the registration table for people to get more information there. What we have left here today, we have resume reviews, we have speed interviews, we have the raffle for headshots still taking place. You can take tours of the Loyola Theater Building. If you've never seen the different spaces inside the theater, that's a good opportunity. So there's a lot still going on. I know we got everybody in here because the registration line was out the door, which is amazing. We're going to just continue to build this event in the years to come. So if you didn't get a chance to sign up for a speed interview, you want to sign up for the raffle for the headshot, please, you can do that at the registration table, but spend some time here. As you see, there's a lot of people, so there's going to be a little bit of a line. Please bear with us. Jamie, is there anything else I'm supposed to say that I forgot?
No, that's great.
Okay. All right.
Can we get a round of applause for Marissa for starting?
Chicago Theater's team. Please be patient with them and everybody as we get ready. And I want to thank Loyola and their team over here. Thank you all so much for hosting us in this event. All right, you all, thank you. And you can come down here to talk to our panelists.